I'm 30 years old, and I met my husband Stephen when he was 32 at a friend's cousin party. We instantly connected and started dating not long after. We have been happily married for 5 years now and have a 4-month-old son. I met my mother-in-law, MIL, at his uncle's funeral. He asked me to attend in support of him. Before we left, his cousin warned me about my mother-in-law, saying she wasn't the nicest person, and she had impossibly high standards and can be judgmental, so not to take it personally, as she's like that with everyone. I did ask my husband, and he agreed that my mother-in-law can be quite judgmental, but not to worry, that he will be there for me. I felt like they gave me the sugar-coated version of her, because she was terrible. She made a scene about bringing a stranger to a family funeral, but my husband cut her off and said his aunt, who was his uncle's widow, said he could. She spent the rest of the funeral giving me nasty looks and making passive-aggressive comments. She made a scene at our wedding, but that's a different story on its own. But after minimal contact with my mother-in-law, my husband eventually got around to telling her that I was pregnant. I expected her to be angry and have a go at him, but she surprised us both and was the complete opposite. She was excited about being a grandmother. She was congratulating us. Her attitude did a complete turn, and I grudgingly allowed her to visit. When it was time to give birth to my son, she wanted to see my son being born, but I refused. That's when her ugly side reared its head again, and she caused a scene and was thrown out. I refused to let her visit us at home. My husband agreed. But she rang crying and apologizing. She said she was just overwhelmed about being a grandmother, and her emotions got the better of her. Against my better judgment, I relented and said okay. When she first held him, she looked at me and said he was beautiful. I went into the kitchen to get us a drink, and then I could hear my husband telling her to get out. I went back in. She started yelling. He needed to get the baby tested because he doesn't look like anyone in their family. He kicked her out. She took to social media and told everyone that I cheated on my husband and that my husband needs to get a DNA test to prove he was the dad. She got a lot of attention for that, so I made my own post and said I'll get a test when she gets a test for her son. That just made everything worse. She rang my husband up, telling him to take it down. He just hung up on her. Everyone divided and questioning my husband's paternity since she had such a strong reaction to it. Now even my husband is starting to wonder and making me feel I went too far, and I'm thinking, am I the idiot for saying that? Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. Not the idiot. She doesn't sound stable at all, and I would be worried about what she would do around the child. Even if she was just another weirdly incestuous boy mom, that mood swing, going from one extreme to another in a blink of an eye, goes beyond jerk into dangerous territory. Also, her demanding to see the birth and immediately taking to social media also indicates she has no concept of boundaries. To have someone like that around your child, even if she doesn't do anything drastic, could be very damaging. Also, if she wants to make her delusions public, she can handle your public response. If you don't want a witch hunt, don't make a pyre. Comment 2. Not the idiot. Maybe not the nicest way to handle, but when you deal with shoot, your hands are bound to get dirty. Keep holding your ground and just tell her to stop spouting lies about you on social media, or you will continue to embarrass her on your own account. And she can face the consequences of her own actions. Now, for the update. Hey everyone, thanks for all the comments on my last post. It's been a hectic 3 months since then, and I've got quite the update for you all. After the whole mess with my mother-in-law MIL accusing me of cheating and demanding a DNA test, things got even more heated. My husband, Stephen, was torn. He trusted me, but the seed of doubt his mother planted was hard to ignore. We had a few rough nights, full of long talks and tears. In the end, we decided to do the DNA test, not for her, but for us, to put any doubts to rest. While we waited for the results, my mother-in-law was relentless. She'd call Stephen at all hours, crying, apologizing, then accusing again. It was a cycle that wore us both down. I remembered the time when Stephen and I first met at that friend's cousin's party. We had clicked instantly, and it felt like we were meant to be. It was hard to believe that the same woman who had welcomed me with open arms at our wedding was now causing so much pain. The day the results came in was nerve-wracking. Stephen opened the envelope, and I watched his face for any sign of what it said. He looked up at me, his eyes filled with tears, and hugged me. Our son was his, no doubt about it. We both cried, relieved, but the damage his mother had done was still there, hanging over us. We confronted my mother-in-law with the results, and she broke down, admitting that she had been wrong to ever doubt us. She begged for forgiveness, but it wasn't easy to just move on. Stephen was hurt, and I was furious. We agreed that she needed to make amends, not just with words, but with actions. In the following weeks, my mother-in-law tried to make it up to us. She'd drop off meals, send gifts for our son, and leave apologetic notes. But it all felt hollow. It was during this time that I learned more about Stephen's childhood. He told me stories of how his mother's judgmental nature had affected him growing up. She had always been tough on him, pushing him to meet her high standards. It made me see her outburst not as a singular event, but as part of a pattern. One day, she showed up unannounced, crying, saying she had been to therapy and realized how much she had hurt us. She wanted to be part of her grandson's life. It was a turning point, seeing her take responsibility for her actions. We cautiously started to allow her short, supervised visits. Things were slowly improving until one day, when she was over, my phone buzzed with a message from an old friend from college. It was a picture of me and a guy friend from a party back in the day. Nothing incriminating, but my mother-in-law saw it and went off the deep end again. She accused me of having a past full of secrets and stormed out. Stephen knew about my friend, and we had a good laugh about his mom's overreaction, but it was clear that trust was still fragile. The visits continued, and my mother-in-law started to bond with our son. It was heartwarming to see her with him, and I could tell it meant the world to Stephen. But every time she left, there was an obvious tension, a fear that something might set her off again. Then, 2 months ago, Stephen's cousin, the one who had warned me about my mother-in-law at the funeral, reached out. He had found old love letters from my mother-in-law to someone who wasn't Stephen's father. The family was in an uproar. It turned out my mother-in-law had her own secret past. Stephen was shocked, and it made him reflect on how quick his mother was to judge others. We decided to keep the information to ourselves. It wasn't our secret to tell, and we didn't want to add more fuel to the fire. But it made us both look at my mother-in-law differently. It was like we could finally see the insecurity behind her judgmental facade. Just last week, my mother-in-law sat us down. She had been doing a lot of thinking and wanted to apologize again, this time for everything. She admitted that her behavior had been inexcusable and that she was working on changing. She asked if we could start fresh, for the sake of our son. Fiancé ditches me for an ex, so I trash her family's offer on our lake house. They think they can bully me, but the deed's in my pocket. 10 years ago, my fiancé left me, 38-year-old male, a few weeks before our wedding. We grew up in a small town. We were friendly and went to the same school, but we were never in the same clique. She was one of the popular kids, and I wasn't. A few years after college, I moved back home when my dad got sick. I found a job in my field about 45 minutes away from home. I would help take my dad to his chemo appointments. It was during one of those appointments that I ran into EX. She now worked at the hospital. One day while waiting, I asked her out. It turned out we shared a lot of the same interests. It seemed like our relationship was going great. About a year or so into dating EX, I moved into a rented house together. The following year, I proposed. We began looking for a house. EX always wanted to live in her grandparents' house on the lake near our town. Her family was forced to sell the house when her grandparents died because of an inheritance dispute. 6 months before our wedding, a chance event happened. The couple who bought her grandparents' lake house had grown tired of our snowy winters. It took some work and nearly all of my savings, but I was able to buy her dream house. It was going to be my surprise wedding present, so I didn't dare tell her, or anyone in her family, my plans. A month before our wedding, EX and her friends went to Miami for her bachelorette party. I'm not sure all of what happened there. Part of me doesn't really want to know, but I do know her high school boyfriend was there. When she got back from the trip, she broke down and confessed she was afraid to get married and wanted to call it off. It was a mess. She later moved to Florida and eventually married her high school boyfriend. I ended up moving back to the city for an amazing job. In the meantime, I still had the lake house. With the help of my mom and dad, we started to fix up the lake house. It took a few years. My mom and dad would look after the contractors while I was in the city. Having the house was perfect when everything locked down. I was able to escape the city and work remotely from the lake house. I now live here full-time and work remotely. This summer, we had 4th of July at the lake house. My sister-in-law used photos from the lake this summer in her Christmas card. One of those cards made it to EX's cousin. The cousin recognized the house. The Saturday before New Year's, EX's mother and sister were at my front door. After pleasantries and answering their initial questions, they made an offer to buy it. I refused. they were not happy. A few days later, I got a long text from EX. This was the first time in about 9 years she has talked to me. She called me an butt for keeping this from her. Her family is blaming her for losing the house again. She then asked me to sell. I still have no intention to sell. Now her and her family are complaining on social media that this is some sort of revenge. Am I the idiot? Now for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. Not the idiot. So after more than 10 years and a presumably expensive renovation, your ex and her family want the lake house back. What a lot of gall they have. Any time in the last 10 years, any of them could have tracked down the owner, you, from the county tax records, and made an offer. They can eat their sour grapes and get lost. Comment 2. You are most definitely not the idiot, and you sound like a pretty great dude. Hell, you bought your ex an entire house as a wedding gift. If it was so important for her family to get it back, they should have paid closer attention to if it was on the market. You put tons of work and money into this house. You deserve it. Now for the update. Hey Reddit, back with an update on the lake house drama. It's been a wild 3 days since I last posted, and things have taken some unexpected turns. So after I refused to sell the lake house to my ex's, EX family, I thought that would be the end of it. But boy, was I wrong. The day after I posted, I got a knock on my door. It was my ex's sister, let's call her Sarah. Sarah and I had always gotten along, even after the breakup. She looked upset, and I could tell she was here to talk about the house. Sarah confessed that she had been the one to show the Christmas card to their cousin, not realizing the fallout it would cause. She felt guilty and wanted to apologize. We talked for a while, and she admitted that the family was putting a lot of pressure on EX to fix the situation. They saw the house as a symbol of their grandparents and felt like it was the last piece of them they had left. The next day, things got even more complicated. I was out on the lake when I saw someone on my dock. It was EX. She had flown in from Florida without telling anyone. She looked different, not just older, but there was a sadness in her eyes that wasn't there before. We sat on the dock and she explained everything. Turns out, her marriage wasn't the fairy tale she hoped for. Her husband, the high school boyfriend, had been cheating on her. She found out just before coming to see me. She was devastated and felt like her life was falling apart. She also admitted that she never stopped thinking about what could have been between us and that she regretted leaving me for him. But here's the kicker. Reddit. She didn't just come to apologize or to ask for the house again. She came to tell me that her husband had been the one to convince her to call off our wedding all those years ago. He had been at her bachelorette party in Miami and had manipulated her into thinking she wasn't ready for marriage. He wanted her back and saw me as an obstacle. I was flawed. All this time, I thought it was cold feet, but it was him. I didn't know what to say. I felt a mix of anger and sadness. Anger at him for ruining what we had, and sadness for EX, who had been living with the consequences of that decision. We talked for hours, and it was like we were the only two people in the world. It was clear there were still feelings between us, but I was cautious. After all, she had hurt me deeply, and I had spent years rebuilding my life without her. The next day, I got a call from my mom. She had heard from Sarah that EX was in town and wanted to know what was going on. I told her everything, and she was just as shocked as I was. My mom had always liked EX and felt bad about how things ended. But then, my mom dropped a news of her own. She told me that before EX left for Miami, all those years ago, she had come over to talk about wedding plans. My mom had seen her crying in her car afterwards, but EX had brushed it off as wedding stress. Now, here's where it gets even crazier. My mom revealed that she had seen EX's now husband around town a few times before the bachelorette party. He had been asking about me and EX, and my mom got a bad vibe from him. She never mentioned it because she didn't want to cause trouble, but now she wished she had. So, here I am, trying to process all of this. EX is still in town, staying at a local hotel. She's asked if we can talk again, and I agreed. I'm not sure where this will go, or if I can ever trust her again, but I feel like I need closure. And as for the lake house, it's still mine. I've put too much into it to let it go, especially now that I know the full story. But I can't help but feel for EX, who's been through so much because of one man's manipulation. My husband tried to gaslight me into renaming our son, but he's not falling for it. The twist, he's the heir to A. My 15-year-old male, parents gave my sister, 16-year-old female, brother, 13-year-old male and me nature names, specifically water nature names. My sister is Ocean, I'm Cove, and my brother is River. They wanted our names to have a theme without being matchy with the same initial, so we got these names. The story was told to us when we were little, and my parents were proud of the names they gave us. Back when we were all stuck at home, my parents started to express regret about their choices for us. They actually told us over dinner one night that they wish they had given us better names and apologized for making us live with the names we were given. A few months after that apology, my mom and dad told us they wanted to change our names to Elizabeth for my sister, James for me, and Michael for my brother. They said, since we were kids and weren't in college yet, and nobody had their license at that point, it would be the best time to do it. All three of us said we didn't want to change our first names. My dad looked into whether they could do it when we said no, and all the answers he got pointed to a very strong no. But it was also unusual to change your older kids' first names, so they went ahead and tried anyway. But once we were asked if we wanted different names, we were told no. My parents brought it up a lot to us afterward. My brother asked why they wanted to name him Michael and said the name was crappy. They told him Michael was a timeless name that would age well and gave him some nickname choices. He said he hated it, so they asked if he would consider Charles instead, which he said was an even bigger no. Our parents focused really hard on him for a while because he had asked the question about the name, so they figured he was the most open. So far, none of us have agreed to the name change. I told my parents that I know they regret the names, but we're all used to and like our names and don't want to go for more boring and common names. My parents argued that in the future, we will regret it and we'd have to pay for it ourselves when we're adults, and we realize having weird names does not age well. I asked why they can't let us get there if we ever do. They said we should be thinking more of our futures, and they accused me of having a really bad attitude because I said James was as bad to me as Cove is to them now. They told me to look online, and I did, and I saw a lot of hate for our names. But I told them it still didn't change my mind. My parents said we should respect them enough as parents to allow this, and that we're all being disrespectful. Am I the idiot? Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. Not the idiot, your parents thought their theme was so unique and clever. Then they went online and saw that there's a lot of hate for it. Now they feel bad that the names might affect your futures. But the time for them to worry about that was before they named you. You guys like your names. You feel your identities are tied to those names, and you want to keep them. They gave no right to bully you about this, just because they regret their choices. You are teenagers, not puppies. Comment 2. Not the idiot. Sounds to me like the only ones embarrassed of your names are the people who gave them to you all. Sounds like they've got Bertha's remorse. My mother decided to name my sisters and I after the names of various plants and trees, so I also have an unusual name, but I love it, and I wouldn't change it for the world. Sometimes my name gets me unusual looks when I'm called at the GP's office, but I get a lot more positive remarks towards it by far. Now for the update. Hey Reddit, it's Cove again with an update on the whole name change saga. It's been a wild week, and things have definitely escalated since I last posted. So, after I shared our story, my sister Ocean found the post. She was furious, not at me, but at our parents for putting us through this. She's always been the protective type, and seeing her younger brothers being pressured like this set her off. She confronted our parents, demanding to know why they were so obsessed with changing our identities. They just repeated their old argument about future regrets and job prospects. But here's where it gets juicy. Ocean revealed that she had been doing some digging into our family history. Turns out, our mom had a sister named Elizabeth, who she had a falling out with years ago. We never knew about her because our mom never mentioned her. Ocean accused our parents of trying to replace her estranged sister with her by giving her the same name. Our parents were speechless. They tried to deny it, but the tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Meanwhile, my brother River has been having his own battles. He's the youngest and usually goes with the flow, but this name thing has really gotten to him. He's been more defiant, refusing to answer to anything but River. He even started a mini rebellion at school, getting his friends to call him by his middle name, which is another water-themed name. Our parents were called in for a meeting with the principal, who was concerned about River's sudden change in behavior. They were mortified, and it sparked another huge argument at home. As for me, I've been doing some thinking. I looked up famous people with unique names, and I found plenty who've done just fine for themselves. I tried to explain to my parents that a name doesn't define your success, but they wouldn't listen. They're convinced that we'll be held back by our names, and that they're doing us a favor. The biggest shocker, dropped just 2 days ago. Ocean overheard our parents talking about how they were considering legal action to force the name changes. They were discussing getting a lawyer to see if there was any way they could override our wishes, since we're still minors. Ocean was livid. She stormed into the room and told them if they tried to force this, she would move out the moment she turned 18 and cut contact with them. I've never seen our parents look so defeated. They tried to backtrack, saying they were just exploring options, but the damage was done. The trust between us has been shattered. They've stopped bringing up the name changes for now, but the air in our house is heavy with unsaid words and what-ifs. It's been a rough week, and I'm not sure where we go from here. Our parents have been quieter, and there's this unspoken understanding that they crossed a line. Ocean, River, and I have been sticking together, supporting each other through this mess. We're more united than ever in keeping our names and our identities. If you like this video, you'll probably like these too. Also, while you're here, please consider subscribing. It's your support that keeps this channel alive and allows me to make better and longer videos. Have a great day.